The man's heart had been stopped for almost 3 minutes. His brain, by every instrument in that room, was producing no electrical activity at all.
And when he woke up, he correctly described the exact sequence of what happened around him. The sounds, the people, the words spoken in close to real time, as if he had been watching the whole thing happen.
Doctors call this medically impossible. It happened anyway. And it took the largest study of its kind ever conducted, 15 hospitals, 2 countries, 4 years, to even begin asking how.
Now, normally, I'd tell you his name first. Not this time, because this isn't really a story about one man.
It's a story about a single, terrifyingly simple question that the largest scientific study of its kind ever conducted spent 4 years trying to answer.
The question was this: if a human heart stops completely, if blood flow to the brain ceases entirely, is there anything left in there to perceive anything at all?
Mainstream neuroscience has one answer. No blood flow means no brain activity. No brain activity means no consciousness. Full stop, case closed.
So a cardiologist named Dr. Sam Parnia decided to actually test it. Not with theory, not with belief, with an experiment so simple, so elegant, that it's almost embarrassing no one had done it properly before.
Here's the test. In hospital rooms across the United States and the United Kingdom, researchers placed small images, face up, on top of high shelves.
Shelves so high, so specifically positioned, that there was exactly one way to see what was on them. You'd have to be floating near the ceiling, looking straight down.
If patients who survived cardiac arrest reported leaving their bodies, and if even one of them could describe what was on a shelf they never should have been able to see, it would be one of the most significant findings in the history of consciousness research. The study ran for 4 years, 15 hospitals, thousands of patients. Now, I need you to hold this fact in your mind, because it's the foundation everything else is built on. Cardiac arrest is not the same as a slow decline. It is instantaneous. The heart stops. Blood flow to the brain stops within seconds. And within roughly 10 to 20 seconds, the brain's electrical activity, the thing an EEG measures, goes flat. This is not a controversial fact. This is basic, settled physiology. A flat EEG during cardiac arrest is one of the most well-documented phenomena in all of medicine. By every conventional model neuroscience has, the moment that line goes flat, conscious experience should be impossible. Not unlikely, not reduced. Impossible. There is no mechanism under current scientific understanding for the brain to generate the rich, structured, sequential experience of memory formation when it isn't receiving oxygenated blood. This is the wall that the AWARE study was built to test. Over the 4 years of the study, researchers recorded 2060 cardiac arrest events. 140 of those patients survived long enough to be interviewed afterward. Think about what you are being asked to accept here. 2,060 hearts stopped. 2,060 brains, by every measurement available, went dark. And of the 140 who survived to describe what happened, 9% reported memories consistent with what researchers classify as a near-death experience, using a clinical scale developed specifically to measure these reports. But here's where the study gets genuinely difficult to dismiss. Of those patients, a smaller number described something more specific. Not a vague feeling, not a sensation of peace. They described awareness. Specifically, awareness of being outside their own body, watching the resuscitation happen as if from somewhere above.
And here is where it gets impossible to dismiss in the way most people expect. One patient, a 57-year-old man, resuscitated in the United Kingdom, described his cardiac arrest in detail that researchers were able to independently verify against the actual medical timeline. He described hearing a particular sound, an automated voice from the defibrillator, instructing staff to shock the patient. He described seeing a man he didn't recognize, with a bald head positioned to his left. He described a nurse calling for a doctor specifically with the words, "Dial 444, cardiac arrest." Every single detail he reported matched the documented timeline of his resuscitation, including details medical staff confirmed actually happened in the order he described them. This occurred during a period when, by EEG measurement, his brain showed no detectable electrical activity. I want you to sit with this for a moment. Not low activity, not reduced, none. Here's the detail that even surprised the research team. His perception of time during this experience did not match what you'd expect from a brain producing memories normally. He estimated the events he witnessed lasted somewhere between 2 and 20 minutes. The actual resuscitation, the real documented timeline, lasted approximately 3 minutes. His account roughly matched real time, not the compressed, dreamlike sense of time you'd expect from a brain reconstructing memories after the fact. A sequential, roughly real-time account of events that happened while his brain, by every instrument in the room, was producing nothing. Now, about those hidden shelf targets, I want to be straight with you, because this channel doesn't oversell its evidence. Across the entire 4-year study, only a small handful of patients who were resuscitated in rooms with the shelf images also reported a clear out-of-body experience. None of those specific patients ended up describing the shelf contents directly, but the experimental design itself remains the most rigorous attempt science has ever made to test consciousness during clinical death directly, instead of just relying on memory and trusting the brain that's supposedly not even there to produce it. Now, I need to address the most obvious counter-argument directly, because the AWARE study has been scrutinized by mainstream science more than almost any MDE research on record. The skeptic's argument goes like this: cardiac arrest is messy. The exact moment the brain truly stops all activity is harder to pin down clinically than people assume. Some critics point to a phenomenon documented in certain animal studies, a brief burst of brain activity, sometimes called a surge, occurring close to the point of death, and argue this could theoretically account for some perception in a narrow window, even with a flat EEG on standard hospital equipment. This is a real published critique. Standard EEG equipment used in hospital settings isn't designed to catch every possible signal. Here's the problem with applying it fully to this specific case. The patient's account didn't just include vague impressions. It included a specific, sequential, verifiable series of events, sounds, people, spoken phrases that matched the actual documented resuscitation record, occurring across a window of time that extended well beyond what a brief electrical surge would plausibly explain. Dr. Sam Parnia, who led the study, has been careful, as serious researchers are, about overstating the conclusion. He has not claimed the study proves consciousness survives death. What he has said in his published findings is more specific. He said that this case and others like it suggest that the period immediately following cardiac arrest deserves significantly more scientific investigation than it has received.
Because current models of brain function and consciousness do not adequately explain what some patients are accurately reporting. That is not a researcher promising you the soul is real. That is the lead researcher of the largest study of its kind, saying the gap between what we understand about consciousness and what some patients are accurately describing is real, and it is currently unexplained. Subscribe, because next week, we go somewhere this series hasn't gone yet. A woman, fully conscious, dying of cancer, who suddenly, hours before her death, sat up and held a complete, lucid conversation with a relative 3 rooms away. A phenomenon so consistently documented across hospice care
that it now has a clinical name, terminal lucidity, and no one can fully explain why it happens right before the brain shuts down for good. That case is next. If you haven't seen where this series started, a woman whose heart stopped for 11 minutes on an operating table, that case is on this channel too. You already know something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. That is not nothing. That is the beginning.